Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Intuitive Queens podcast. I'm your host, Mara Marchesi, aka the Intuition Queen. This podcast started with the intention to inspire as many people as possible. I really love listening to stories, and that's why I started to interview amazing people. And I wanted to share with everybody that it's possible to change your life. It's possible to overcome challenges, to overcome hurt. In this podcast, you will hear so many stories of people that have gone through deep struggles and major trauma, or simply overcame challenges in their life. And the intention is to inspire you, to reflect on your life, and to take action, maybe with me or maybe with one of the guests, or simply to just feel like you can relate to them and you're not alone. So, with this intention, I hope you enjoy the next guest. Hi, everyone. In this episode of Intuitive Queens podcast, we have Carol Mae Whittick, who is a creative and spiritual life coach, podcaster, speaker, and author. And she supports women over 40 to trust their intuition, rediscover their creativity, leverage their unique wisdom, and design a purposeful life. I can't speak today. Hi, Carol. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Hi. It's okay. Some days who wants to talk?
When you have your tongue that is like, ugh. But I like it to go anyway because this is real. So let's just go with it.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for being here. We do very similar things, and that's why I wanted you here because we have a lot of similarities, and we talk about intuition and we talk about creativity and a lot of healing and things like that. And we chatted before, so I'm curious to know how was your connection with your intuition before you started to doing this, and what brought you to do what you're doing.
Sure. Thanks. My connection to my to my connection to my intuition came from my um just me delving into my creativity at a very, very early age. My creativity was my safe place. I was in a very chaotic environment, and in order to manage that environment, I just found things to do. So I played the piano, I made clothes, I made things, I was reading, and it was just always to go into that space of what am I going to do next? How am I going to, what song shall I write? What poem shall I write? So it was always that I was being led and guided by something that I didn't really question at that point. I didn't question where it was coming from until I got a bit older, and it was like, actually, yeah, where is this coming from? Because um, when I was learning how to play the piano, for instance, my teacher would tell me to go to the store and buy a certain book. And then I'd come back and we'd learn the music from the book. But as I got more skills, then I would just sit around and start to have ideas. And it was like,
Mm.
okay, so where are these ideas coming from? So it was knowing that it was always coming from something and or somewhere, and just also getting ideas to do things, getting ideas that things would be okay, knowing that I was always going to win stuff. I can remember entering a competition and just knowing that I was going to win. It wasn't even like I just knew I had to enter the competition in order so that they had my name, but I knew I was going to win it before. And my journey from, a little girl to where I am now. And one of the stories that I vividly remember was when I was learning how to ride a bike, and that was me just fumbling around for a few days and then having a really vivid dream of just riding a bike, just like
Mm.
seeing it, feeling it, like what we would call nowadays as a visualization practice, with all the
Yeah,
senses. But as a young girl, I just remember just feeling the whole sensation of being balanced, moving forward, and it was like, oh, that's what it feels like, and just knowing that that's what it felt like, and then getting on the bike the next day and riding the bike. There was no
amazing.
in between time of things, but of course I didn't have the language for it.
Mm.
And but that connection to my intuition came from just knowing things that I needed to do, what to write, what to look for, how to write. No one taught me how to write songs or the structure of anything. And it wasn't until I was much older that then I started to take lessons and realized that I knew a lot of the stuff already. No one
Right.
else in my family went down that path. So there was something guiding me already. I didn't know what it was. And so yeah, it's been a lifelong connection that I've been aware of. And it's interesting, as I grew up and left home, then I started to let the world kind of influence that connection a little bit. So
Mm.
sometimes I trusted what I was seeing, other times I'd listen to external voices, and it was a way to learn. It was a way to learn that, yeah, what you're being shown is real, but oftentimes we don't take the prompts, and sometimes you learn by not taking the prompt and going through the results of that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you had this inner knowing and you trusted it. And I'm curious to know a little bit because you talked about growing up in a chaotic environment, and so obviously your creativity was that thing that helped you to cope with the chaos around you. And because oftentimes, especially when I work with clients, and I think this is a little bit my story, coming from a chaotic environment, then you get disrupted. And yes, I did the same thing that you were doing in a different kind of way. Like I was in my word and I was doing my thing, very physical stuff and creative stuff as well. Um, my intuition started to kick in more and I started to trust it more as I left rather than when I was there because there was so much. And for you, it's actually the opposite way around. And my question for you is, do you feel that that is because maybe you kind of felt like you made it out of that environment and so you didn't need to rely that much on yourself? Or do you feel there is another reason for it?
I mean, I never left it. It was that I allowed other I allowed other influences to question it. So I'd
Mm,
always end up going back because even though I'd left home, you're still attached to your family until you make the decision that you're absolutely not. So the chaos still ensued. I might not
yeah,
be physically in the house, but we're still connected. So even when I'd go and come, go and visit and come back to wherever I was living, it took me a time to really decompress and kind of get back on track. But it was when I realized that not everybody thought the same that I started to go, oh, well, why does no one feel the same? Or wanting
right,
to have those deeper conversations with other people about my experience because I was so fascinated by it that realizing not everyone or very few people at that time in the environment that I was in had those experiences. So it became so much more of a secret, and then so much more to allow doubt and allow my own questions to infiltrate it. But
right.
uh, and if I think over those years, there were many times where I'd get like knowings of certain situations, like don't move into that house, don't
Mm,
that I sometimes I went with it and sometimes I didn't. But that creativity always stayed with me, so I'd always go back to it, especially when I was going through the creative process, when I was writing songs, when I was doing something creative. I always and to this day do, but it wavered a lot more when I was just a child. You don't really start to question what you know as a child until you start to
mm-mm.
be in the world at large and realize not everyone thinks the same or sees things the same as you.
Yeah, 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 totally. Because then you kind of want to fit in the group of friends that you have, the people you study with, the people you're working with, and yeah, you get into that environment. Um, okay, so tell us tell us a little bit more about. So you talked about writing songs, and I mean, we had a conversation before, so I know that you were
Mhm.
into music.
Mhm.
I would assume this was kind of like a natural path. So tell us a little bit how your movement forward and how you got to here, because I assume you had things that you were doing before,
Mm.
which were obviously connected to creativity. So how did your path unfold over the years?
Yeah, so over the years, then I did what any ambitious wannabe wannabe pop star did. I moved to London, right? And because I'd been born in London, and I lived in the Midlands when I grew up, and then I got to a certain point where I'm like, in order for me to be in the right environment,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to come back to London. This is like pre-internet, imagine, but it was. And for me, the place to be was here, and I'd always had the connection of coming back down south anyway. One, I still had a lot of family here. I always visited them in the holiday. I loved the energy of London,
Mm.
and I just wanted to be back here, so I moved back. And then it just was like many years of just trying trying to do what it takes, working in hospitality, working in retail, working in sales, always having like a separate job that was getting me enough money to go to the studio and get these songs down and create CDs and artwork and then send them off in jiffy bags to record companies and publishing houses and doing gigs and all of that kind of stuff. And I just did that for a long, long time, because I always saw myself doing that.
Right.
And yeah, that's kind of what kept me going, and also keeping on that path of wanting to have that career still like actually saved me. And even though people might go, well, you never made it, it's like, but I made it more than you would ever know, because
Mm.
had I have not had that to kind of just like reset back to, my reset was, I can't get too upset and swayed by the things that are not working in my life, the
Right.
the things that are really upsetting, the chaos that's following me, the disappointments that are following me. I need to reset because this is where I need to go. So, it might take me like a few weeks or something to get back. It's like, right, we need to get back onto, we need to write these songs, we need to focus, we need to do that. So my creativity and my desire to create this thing for myself always brought me back because I had a goal. And along the way, I worked with some amazing people. I traveled, I wrote songs for products and things like that. So maybe not like massive big time, but I still learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about resilience. I learned to really develop my own skills and my own craft. I learned to discipline. I learned about collaboration, and I learned about trust in myself and
Mm.
in my own talent, especially when you're constantly getting all of those rejection letters. There came a point where I just got rid of them. I'm like, okay, what is the point of me keeping all of these rejection letters? So I didn't want the energy of them around me anymore.
Yeah.
um but that ongoing pursuit of something just kept me in a way going forward on my life, and trying to develop something of myself and getting better. And then also during that time, I just became more and more curious about spirituality and what that meant to me. And I came from a religious background, so I had a belief in God and something bigger. So the idea
Mm.
of it not just being me here wasn't
Yeah.
unusual to me. And I kind of was put one of my podcasts out this week was about the first book that I ever read that really opened my eyes up to something outside of just what was written in the Bible, was a book called The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence
Mm.
Scovel Shinn. And that was a book that someone told me to get, and like, you'll really like this book. And that book, it was a book that was written or released in 1925, so it's about 100 years old.
Yeah.
And within that book, when I read it, was still like 10 years or so before The Secret ever got released. So people weren't talking as widely as they do about the law of attraction, about visualization, about having faith with yourself, about affirmation. But this book was all about that, and it also included the Bible. So she kind of wrote the Bible in a way that wasn't religious, but was
Mm.
using the symbology of the Bible to open up to these spiritual concepts. And it blew my mind because I was like, what is this stuff, game of life, how to play it, that your words have power over your life. And that
Right.
really opened up my own journey into spirituality and moving through many different modalities and groups and practices over the years, and kind of seeing the commonalities within all of them, and some of the things that really help, some of the things that are different, and then also forming my own spiritual philosophy, I would say, over the years. So that's kind of how my journey happened. As I was going into creativity, then I realized that I'm speaking to a greater part of myself. This is what this spirituality is about. This is what intuition's about. And then they just became hand in hand. And
Mm.
when I look back over the years, over the songs that I've written, it's always been infused with that kind of thing. It was never just about going out and getting a boy or something. It always had something more about the personal experience, growing, following your dreams, like healing yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it's really melded together, those two things. So that was my path. And so where I am now is just basically a continuation of all of that, and the music will continue because I paused it for a bit, but it's coming back. Yeah, because I can't let it go.
Okay, there's so much there. So I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
You mentioned music and creativity in general saved your
Mm,
life.
mm,
So I have a question for that, but before I forget, I want to also mention when you talked about and now I forgot. So you answered this question, and I'll come back to
sure.
that. Well, so how did creativity music save your life? What was going on? If you feel like sharing what was going on with you, and why
Mm,
did you feel um, that was something that you felt obviously that that was something that you needed to do because it made
yeah,
you feel better or good, but
yeah.
to which extent that saved your life? And yeah.
Hmm. In every sense of the word, like my background was that I was born into the church, so my father was a pastor, like front and center in the church. But he died very early on in my life. I was 4 years old when my dad passed,
Oh,
and then for the next or 40 years actually, my mum had what has been called or diagnosed as a mental illness, bipolar disorder.
right.
So as a result, she was in and out of psychiatric care. So it meant that my home life was very chaotic. It was just me and my brother and her. So she'd be at home for a while and then she wouldn't. And then we'd need to go somewhere else. Or that she'd be in a very elevated mood, and or she'd be in a very low mood. So when you have your primary carer in
Mm-mm.
a kind of a constant unstable emotional state, um you like, well, I'll take it from my point of view. For me, I knew that it wasn't safe, and I mean that not that she was ever dangerous towards me, but it wasn't emotionally safe for me to invest
Yeah.
in her,
Mm-mm.
because one day she'd be really up and the next day she'd be really low. So as a child who needs some sort of stability, when your primary carer can't give you that, it's like, where do you go? And outside of that, the family didn't really know how to deal with it. So
Right.
where else do I go? I had to go inside. There was that was the only place that I could go, because that was the only safe place that was able to go. And with music, and I get guidance. Like I said, I learned how to ride a bike because I got this feed through, and I felt that I was being guided. I kind of named it, maybe this is my dad, like
Mm.
guiding me through life from
Yeah.
wherever he is. So that's why I had such a real faith in that space, and still do
Mm-hmm.
to this day, that I could retreat into my soul, my spirit, that kind of awareness, and know that that is always going to be there, whatever happens, whether I have it all externally or whether I have nothing. And that's been a reality in my external world, where I've been stripped of absolutely everything, but I can still sit in the quiet and go into that space and know that I'm in communion with my soul. And it was then being able to write songs and write the music as well, and really know how to want to say manipulate, but in the most loving kind of way, the music, because my primary instrument is the piano. And one of the things that I like to do when I'm playing is to find like a kind of like a dissonance and a release with the music as well. I like very jazzy, soul-y tunes. So, sometimes jazz chords can be a little bit like, oh, what's happening there? And it will
Mm-hmm.
almost kind of like squeeze you a little bit, and then there's a release to it as well. And I was very much about using that to kind of massage my own emotions, because there'd be songs that I could, and to this day, can listen to, and it's like, oh my gosh, and suddenly you can feel the emotions coming through and feeling the music and understanding where the musician was coming from. And when and I just learned to do that for myself. So I was able to communicate my feelings out through my song, through my music. And that's how it saved me, because I had no other outlet any other place. It was like,
Right.
as long as I'm able to find that space where I can sit and I can write, or I can sit and play and just find those chords and find that music, then at least I know that I've got an outlet. And that's why it meant so much to me. And the idea of turning it into my life's work, helped. But then as time's gone on, I'm like, do you know what? It's probably best that I didn't kind of get into the industry at the time, especially when I thought everything, it was going to be the best of ideas. Um, it wouldn't have been right knowing now. And of course, like if I went back and told myself like 20 years ago, it's not going to be the right time, you're going to have to wait until you're like much older to do your music to the level that you want to do, I would have been like, no way, I'm going to be too old, like all of these
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
we think
And
there's a
that's a question that I wanted to ask you, because you said you had to kind of the words that you use were along the lines of, I didn't become successful, I didn't get to the level that I wanted to go to, but I
mm,
did more than I thought I could. So I love that you said that, and I think this is crucial for a lot of people, not just if you want to be a musician, a singer, a pop star, whatever, but I
mm,
think like on a bigger spectrum, because I think that there are a lot of us have an idea of what we are supposed to become, and
mm,
then when we can't get there, we feel like a failure, we feel like we've done something wrong, we
mm,
feel like we should have done things differently, whatever, and we
mm,
blame ourselves for a lot of things, and then we hold on to that feeling that if we only did this or that rather than that, and we could have.
mm,
So I kind of want, well, now you can't, you a little bit said that
mm,
with the fact that you're coming back now, but I want to go a little bit into that moment, and it feels like it was again an inner knowing moment, like I need to stop this. But
mm,
if you can talk us through that moment where you realize, okay, maybe this is not for me at the
mm,
moment, what was going through and how did you manage that? Because I assume you had expectations about yourself, so making certain decisions, it's not always that easy,
mm.
and you really need to become very honest with yourself when you make that kind of decision. So I kind of wanted to see where you were at and how did it go for you in that moment.
Yeah, that decision was foisted upon me. It was, the opportunity was snatched out of my hands. So about gosh, like 10, 11, 12 years ago, when I really started to understand the internet and what was possible as an independent, I was like, okay, I can stop trying to send like music that's just going to land in a pile in someone's studio that they may or might not give me the time of day, and I'm putting all this energy into trying to convince somebody that I'm good enough to get a record deal and blah 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 blah, that all I'd spent so long trying to do that. And as the idea of finding yourself online and creating your own tribe and everything like that online, I was like, well, maybe then if I understand how this internet thing works, then I can build around myself and build a community around myself, and go from there. So that's what the project was. And I was working with someone at the time, and it was a process of a couple of years that I it's someone that I used to play music and keyboards for another singer. So that's how I met this producer. And over the course of like a couple of years, we started to work very slowly on me just getting like a definitive collection of songs together, because prior to that it was like me working all the hours that I could, paying a London rent as a single person and saving as much money, running into a studio and paying like 250 pounds a day to get as many songs recorded as possible.
Mm-mm.
Anyone who knows how you record songs, if you don't record songs like that, you're not going to get out of it what you want. You just aren't. And especially because I was having to build the entire track. So it wasn't me just going in there strumming guitar or playing. I was trying to create a whole production. So now suddenly I was able to work with someone slowly over the course of a couple of years of like building a track, but also building a relationship with them, in that they understood me as a musician, what my influences were, things that I liked sonically and didn't like sonically, so that when we were starting to create the tracks, they sounded really like me. They were like every
Mm.
little thing was thought of. Instead of trying to create a track in like one day, it was like, let's slowly build this over time, and then we'll play around with the production and play with the mixes, and it was a really slow, organic kind of process, which is the dream for any musician, because you want to really find what your sound is.
Mm.
So it was taking time. And then so the idea was to kind of build that around myself, set up myself online, build a community and go forth in that. And then one day he decided that he was going to go and live in a different country and do music over there. So I was left with a hard drive of 2 years of
Oh.
work, and I was just so gutted, so gutted. I can't even put it into words, that I was just like, I'm going to have to put this down, because I am so, I'd put so much work into it, a couple of years of
Mm-mm.
work, and I was building up a catalogue of songs that sounded like I was happy to play them to people and go, this represents me, as opposed to stuff I'd done in studios that was really rushed, that was okay, but it wasn't, there was always something that I could hear, whereas this was like, it's never perfect, but it was more me, more represented who I
Yeah.
was. And so that's kind of what happened. So I was left with this hard drive, and at the time I didn't even have a laptop. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? And I think over a course of a year, I got it. He came back and actually mixed one of the tracks, and I put a video together. And but by then, like, the steam had kind of come out of me, because I was like
Mm.
really disappointed with the way that things were going, and so I didn't really know how I was going to take it any further. I was just like, I've spent practically 20 odd years chasing this, and I'm here now and I don't know what to do. So I
Right.
pulled back. I pulled back from music because I was just so heartbroken. So like I said, it got snatched away from me.
Mm-mm.
And for a couple of years or so, I didn't even really listen to music, which sounds like an odd thing to
Wow.
say. I was just like, I don't even want to listen to music now. I was just like, I couldn't go anywhere near it. I didn't even know what I was going to do. And I kind of got into like doing freelancing and sales. But I was also at the time learning how to use the internet anyway, how to
Mm-hmm.
work as an entrepreneur online, working out the technical aspects, working out how to build websites, and starting to do stuff like that for other people. So my creativity moved into me freelancing, because by then I'd been made redundant from a job, knowing that I didn't want to do a job or work for anyone anymore. So, but I
Right.
was freelancing that way, and it was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And and then over that kind of last couple of years, then my mum passed as well. So
Oh.
there was the decline of my mum's health, and then the release of her from this physical world as well, because as well, like I said, I'd spent 40 odd years of watching her go up and down with
Yeah.
her own challenges. So then when that happened, I had to really pull back and go, okay, now that I'm not, jumping out of my skin every time the phone rings because I think that something's
Mm-mm.
happened. Now that I'm not doing music and I don't even know what am I doing? I had to then go through what I realized now was a good 5 6 years of grieving. And
Yeah.
it was a very slow process. When you're going through it, you don't realize. When I look back on it, I can see how for about
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 years I was all over the place. and literally as well. So she passed in 2016 August. In 2017 February, I went to India and I did a teacher training course in Kundalini yoga. So I was out there for a month. But as I was there as well, as I was going over, I'm like, as you know, there's a music class where we're doing mantra. I'm going to start singing again. I'm going to use that to start just waking my voice up, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
we do these classes every day. And I had no intention of really going back into music then again, but I just wanted to start to feel my voice in my body.
Yeah.
And then I just started to really delve more into Kundalini yoga. So I was in those circles for a good couple of years. I went out to Bali in 2018 to 2019 and then came back. Then as well had to really deal with the dynamic between myself and my brother, because now that our mother
Mm.
wasn't there, we were faced with who are we as people,
Yeah.
and it was just clear that we were not compatible at that time, or we never had been. But because we'd had, you know, the
Some
direction of having
sort
to
of glue. Your mom was the glue for
yeah,
your family.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then pulling back, it's like we, you know, we need to pull back, we need to say, or my decision was like, I can't be myself in a situation where it's not healthy for me. And
Yeah.
I realized that stemmed back not just over the period of time around my mum, but had been a lifelong dysfunctional dynamic between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to take the step to go, like the decision, like I need to step away. And that was when, you know, again, my intuition was like, if you want to get on with the things that you want to get on with, this isn't going to work, you know. And by then
Mm-hmm.
already I'd started the podcast. So I, you know, I had a little bit of something that I was
Yeah.
channeling my interest into. And you know, it was when people just didn't, why are you doing this podcast? She's not making any money. It doesn't make, you know, when, and I
Mm.
was
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it was a similar thing that I'd have had to battle the family when it had come to my music, where they'd be like, what are you doing that for? You know, like you'll never make it, you know? So again, this thing had come where I was like doing something that I was getting value from. I was speaking
Mm.
to women that were getting value from it, but also still being misunderstood. I'm like, I can't go forward if I always have to diminish who I am.
Yeah.
So that was 2019, then 2020, we know what happened, you know? So it wasn't until like a couple of years ago until I moved just to the outskirts of London and just took some time to reset and resettle and just kind of look at where I got to. By then I turned 50. I'm like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with
Mm.
this life? And just really looking at all the things that I'd been over, I was able to see, especially the period of time since my mom passed up until that point, why I'd been all over the place, because I was just
Right.
like, I was spinning, you know, as you would do when that major force had gone out of your life. And
Yeah.
then it's like, well, what am I going to do? What are the things that people ask me for all the time? How do I help people? And it's in creativity, it's in spirituality, doing women's circles, doing workshops, doing coaching that people have been asking me to do, like unofficially. So I'm like, let me create all the things that I want to do and bring this forward, because as you get to those ages in your life where society is telling you it's over, you're like, hang on a
Mm.
minute, like I've got
I
50
just
years.
started.
Yeah, exactly. I've got 50 years worth of life experience.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it together and turning it into what I am now. So
Mm.
now being able to do the coaching, continuing with the podcast, and then also as well seeing now when I'm going into this next stage of music, I'm not trying to prove it to anybody. Whereas a lot of the time, even though I loved it so much and I was so passionate about it, still am, there was an element of like, I'll show them, you know, one
Mm-mm.
day I'll, you know, everyone will be, you know, all about me, you know. So there was still a level of it wasn't fully pure, the reasons why I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's not about, you know, my money comes from other ways, so it doesn't have to come from there. So I
No.
can just go into it and be fully confident, not worrying about what anyone's saying. I know how the internet works, I know how to spread the word, and I can see how all of those things, all of my life stories will infuse into everything I do, whether it's, you know, podcasting, whether it's writing, speaking, or music, or helping others to discover their creativity and look at how their life has informed exactly what they are going to do. that's where it's all come full circle, you know.
Mm-mm.
Just I've
Yeah.
got here and I'm like, oh, no brainer, it makes sense, you know, even though when you're
Yeah.
going through it, it doesn't. It's like, oh, I get it now. That's why I went through all of that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I've got here.
Oh, oh, so much, so much. I love how you evolve, and it feels like almost like the universe was kind of helping you to release all of the things that were a distraction, but were keeping you from really go within and really figure out what you're here for. Aside
Mm,
from obviously the situation with your mom, which it is draining and confusing at times to have to figure out, okay, so what do we do, and is she
mm,
going to be okay, and all of that. But everything else seems like everything started to fall apart in a certain period of time, and it feels like you've been cleared of everything that was not needed in your
mm.
life, so that
Yeah.
you could go and figure out what really is the thing that you're here for, and what really, like, giving you the clues for your purpose.
Mm.
Would you feel that's fair to say?
Yeah, 100%, you know, and now that I've got to this point as well, like as you get older, you just like give less Fs, man. You really do.
Mm-mm.
You know, like you're just like, do you know what I've been through to get to this point? You know, the fact that I can still get up and have a smile on my face, I could be justified by, you know, being bitter and sad, but I just don't want to do that. And also I see, you know, around me the choices that women make and what that means to their midlife and beyond. You know, the things that are really like cute and cheesy when you're younger, like you really need to clean up and heal that
Mm-mm.
crap and get it out of your system, because it solidifies in you as you get older, and
Yeah.
that becomes your character as a older woman, as a wiser woman. And just because you're 50, 60, 70 doesn't mean that you have to be bitter and tired and
Yeah.
fearful. And I see around me women that have taken one branch and women that have taken another one. I've seen ones that
Mm.
are embracing their knowledge and their wealth
Mm.
and their wealth of knowledge and their wisdom, and have love in their lives and have an open heart. As they grow, they just kind of soften and blossom and become something really beautiful, that
Mm-mm.
you get drawn to, that, you know, that grandma energy, that wisdom woman, you know, and it
Yeah.
becomes bigger and bigger. And then I see ones who go off and become more bitter and more hardened and more just really difficult to be around, to the point that when you're around them you're like waiting to get away.
Yeah.
And that's a choice that we have as women to make as we move through our stages of life, is to, if there's anything that's, you know, that you're hanging on to from the past, clean it up, sis, man, you know, because it's really gonna. And like I said, I've got two very clear examples in my life of one who's chosen the way of forgiveness and love, and one who's still talking about stuff that happened way back when and how so and so. And it's, you know, it's sad, because
Yeah.
both of these women were, again, pivotal women in my life. And to then see them go such vastly different ways by the
Mm-mm.
choices that they make and the healing that they choose to do. Um,
Or not to do.
or not to do, yeah, inspires me to like clean up
Yeah.
whatever it is that I've got, make sure I'm doing a lot of forgiveness, make sure that I'm forgiving myself, looking at all the bits that, you know, that are still not, you know, still might be pulling me back, still might be
Yeah.
holding me back, which is why I knew that being around people who didn't see me for who I was, and then expected me to kind of play small for them, which I did for a long time, because, you know, it's
Yeah.
like, well, it's family, I'm going to do this. But then there comes a point going,
Don't we all? Yeah.
yeah, you know, I'm like, I can't continue to allow your diminished vision of me, um and me play into that, because that's the only thing that you can do when someone's always
Mm-mm.
trying to point out your faults or all the mistakes that you've made. It's like, well, you know, point to me to someone who hasn't made a mistake, you know, and tell me their secrets. But these things have actually made me grow. But there were decisions that I had to make where I'm like, if I want to have the space to develop all the things that I see in my mind. I need to be away from people who have no vision for themselves, let
Yeah.
alone have no vision for me. And that was not an easy thing to do either, as well. That was a second wave of grieving. Um, but in
Yeah.
that grieving, it makes more space for you to be true about who you are. And then going forward, then deciding, okay, what person, what energies, what conversations do I want to have in my life, so that I can be a useful human being, and I can, be around people that want to create a better world, because we're at such a pivotal point in the
Yeah.
world right now that we need people that have a vision for better things.
Oh my God,
But it,
yes, we
you
do.
know, but it, but it starts with us individually by cleaning up our own
Yeah.
mess, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I like that you talked about, so, well, like a lot of us, I guess, we, especially family, what a lot of people don't realize, especially family that have lived in family that were kind of loving and supporting and all of that. When you don't have that, you grew up with families that are always, well, where there is an illness, or they're always pointing out, like you said, your faults, which are not necessarily your faults or your mistakes. It's what they think it is
Mm,
for you, because at the end of the day, we're here and we are experimenting at life and trying to figure out what's the best way for us to move forward. And
mm,
so mistakes are not really mistakes. It's just a way for us to understand what we like, what we don't, what we want, what we don't want. But um when you grow up in those kind of environments, when you're constantly surrounded by people that are supposed to love you and support you no matter what, that are always pointing out and chipping away a little bit of your confidence, if you will, and then you decided to kind of step away and be like, okay, now I'm just going to be me, and I'm just going to do me.
mm,
um Talk us a little bit through that moment, because as you said, like, it was the second time grieving,
mm,
which I think is very important to expand a little bit upon, because we do grieve ourselves, the
mhm,
version of ourselves that no longer will put up with that, or
mhm,
will hide
mhm,
from being who we are, because we have decided to shine and
mhm,
not allow other people to tell us what we should do or not. And also grieve that idea that we have of the people around us, that they are supposed to be in a certain way but unfortunately are not, and
mm.
so we need to step away. How did that go for you, or what are your thoughts in that moment and emotions?
Um, that was like a hard 6 months. It was a, I laugh about it now, but like, trust me, at the time, it was a hard 6 months. And, as time goes on, I'm able to kind of look back and go, what was that?
Mm,
Because it was, like I said, I had to make a decision where I was just seeing something now clearly for the first time. It was like, I can't be around someone who just sees me as that all the time, and also has the ability to convince so many people that I'm so terrible,
yeah.
because it wasn't just one person, it was like many people that were buying into the idea. And like, and it was easy as well because of my mum's having this mental illness diagnosis, to then convince everybody else around in the family that I also had that as well. It's like, Carol's mad,
Mm, wow.
and because, and it was, there's, you can always make things look like anything. It's like, look, she's, keeps going off to India and keeps going off to Bali, and she won't get a proper
She
job, and
doesn't
she's
care. Yeah.
teaching this, and she won't get married, and she won't settle down, and she's got these big ideas. It's like this craziness. And so, like, there were very, like, tangible reasons why you would think that I was crazy,
Mm-mm-mm.
even though I wasn't doing anything other than just trying to figure out my life,
Yeah.
without any guidance. I was literally making it up,
Yeah.
and of course, without having like parental guidance or anyone that I could really speak to, I'm going to make mistakes 9 times out of 10. Just,
Mm-mm. Yeah.
I'm going to go this way, and it's like, no, and I'm just going to mess up umpteen times. So I probably messed up way more than most people mess up, just because I didn't know what I was doing, other than
Mm.
I knew that I wanted to go somewhere. And that was it. That was about as much as I knew. But when I made the decision to separate, and I when I come back from Bali, I was, I had like virtually no money, so I had to like ask for a favor. And even though at the time it's like this is the worst situation ever to be in, it was the best situation because it put me front and center to see exactly where
Mm,
I needed to deal with the core relationship that I needed to deal with. Because it's like, as long as you've got someone that you constantly go to who's diminishing you, that's
yeah,
like the bar, and the
yeah,
bar isn't set very high. And I realized like I'm gonna have to walk away, and I'm gonna have to accept that it might not be in this lifetime that we ever speak again, you know?
right.
And it was
Yeah.
can I do this,
Mm,
um and I mean I did it physically, but then I also had to separate from everything, because then the reality was I've just walked away from my family,
yeah,
and maybe I have like a tentative kind of connection with like the odd cousin or anything, but like the core root of the family, I'm like, I've decided that I can't be there anymore. And there were like just a few months of just feeling really separated from
mm-hmm,
myself, like walking around almost in a daze, I would say. And like everything became very present. It was like, what do I need to do today? Okay, I need to get up and I need to have a shower, have something to eat, go to work, come back, eat, go to bed. I had to literally reduce my life to like the
right.
here and now, because like thinking
There
in
was too
any,
much going on.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I couldn't, because then also there was this energetic separation that
yeah,
I couldn't even, like to put words to it at the time. I didn't know. I was walking around just like doing what I needed to do just to make sure that I was functioning on a physical level, but on any other level, I was barely functioning.
yeah.
And then the only thing I could really keep going at the time was the podcast. I'm like, I need to just cling to something.
Mm-mm.
And that was literally the only thing that I had. And I managed somehow to like keep episodes of it going. It went every single week, but I just had this little thread of
Yeah.
something that's like, just keep hanging on to that. That's all I could do. And so over that time, and I remember during, I don't know what I was doing like sales work. So, I was doing like events. So I'd be going out to like France and Germany and stuff like that, doing these events or doing them in the UK. So again, I was still moving around a lot. And I'd come back to London. I hadn't like sorted out where I was going to live. So I was staying with friends. Chaos, there was no
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
stability at all. And I remember one time going out there, and I don't know if it was a full moon or a new moon or something, and we went out to Germany. We needed to be there a little bit earlier just because of the time we needed to get there. And I remember just sleeping for like, we had like a day or something before, and I slept. And I'm not a sleeper, but I just slept completely for hours and hours. And then I woke up the next day and felt, oh, like something had kind of reconnected a little bit, because
Mm.
I was starting to feel like a little bit more grounded, where I hadn't felt grounded for months. I'd just been
Yeah.
like in survival mode. And then another thing that really brought me back was there was a song that I heard, and it was a gospel song. And this is also when I separated from Kundalini, because I realized that the mantras and the practice weren't getting deep enough for me, because I was in
Right.
such a low place that just doing that practice just wasn't enough,
Enough.
wasn't touching the sides. I was in I to this day I can't describe it, and I hope that I get the words, because this is something I really want to write about, but I can never find the words for some reason,
Yeah.
to really fully explain what it was. And I remember playing this song, and it was a singer saying, "This is my exodus, this is my exodus," and it's talking about just going through the hardest of times, and then really just asking to be delivered. It's like a gospel song, so
Mm.
she's singing to God. And um, I remember playing that song on repeat and just crying, 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 crying constantly. And the thing about her performance in that song, and it's Leandra Davis. I've probably got that wrong, but it's Leandra's her first name. And now, every now and again, I go back and check that song on YouTube, because it's got tens of millions of views,
Mm.
because the way that she sang that song, just from the first note, is she was singing and she like brought her soul up, and she sang in such a way that got me, and I was like, oh, like I need to go on this journey with her in the way that she was singing. And that was my prayer, and that was what was starting to get me to really feel the depth and the pain and the loss and the grief that I was feeling, and just being able to like cry and cry and cry, and then read the comments as well of the people who were talking about what that song was doing for them. She kind of captured something, um she captured something in her performance that spoke not only to her, because her story was a story of trouble as well, but had then put it out there for
Yeah,
everyone to
it
listen to. And it
resonated
was,
with a lot of people.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it was a live performance, because there's a studio performance which is great, but it's not as nowhere as near
Mm-hmm.
what this live performance was. And just the way that she did it, and just watching everyone in the audience when she did that performance, you know, everyone was just like, oh my god, because she pulled something up, and that
Yeah.
song got me out of wherever I was. And I just listened to it and started to like crawl up and out of where I got to, and just slowly kind of bring myself together. And then, you know, the next year was the COVID era, and I managed to stay with a work colleague for like a year and a bit and just
Wow.
be still in one place. So like everyone's experience of that was different. And then of course watch the world, you know, turn into what the world turned
Mm-hmm.
into. But um that was a really kind of my journey out of that period of time into feeling a bit more solid. But it still took a couple of years of like waiting for things to like kind of settle so that I could get out and find a space, to the space that where I am now, which is just on the edge of London as well. So it was a bit slower. And then even when I moved here, for the first year, I didn't really work that much. One, because it's not as expensive, so I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to. But also, I just needed to calm down for a year and
Yeah.
just heal and be slow and not worry about stuff. And then after a while, it's then I had, like I said, I had my 50th birthday, and I'm like, okay, so what we're gonna do? And then I
Mm-hmm.
started to like pull the bits of my life that I'd ignored. You know, it's like, why have you stopped doing music? You know what I mean? It was
Mm-hmm.
literally like a thought that came to my head. It's like, why did you stop doing that? Oh, because you got your butt hurt about something. Like, so it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like because anyone said you couldn't. It's like you got upset and
Yeah.
you had a little bit of a tantrum.
Yeah.
So like, you know,
Yeah.
pull all of these things together again, and then just getting the podcast and like cranking it back up again, and separate, building a separate platform, and then just building more, and answering the call to people who were like, I want to work with you, can you help me with
Mm-mm.
this? I see how do you do that? And realize
Yeah.
that these were not things that I really had to learn. These are things that I knew because of the life that I'd been through. So it was just like not really anything that anyone had to tell me. All I had to do was live my life, and then
Mm-hmm.
realize I had in front of me everything that I needed.
Oh, I
And
love
like
that.
with, you know, and like with all the women that I speak to on the podcast, it's always through some experience that they've had that they realize that they have the gift to give back.
Yeah.
You know, so it was never anything difficult. It was just me going, oh, this is my life, hang on, this is what it makes, you know. And it was all of those experiences that that just set me here, and then just made me go, oh, that wasn't that hard, you know. Of course, you know, it's effort and I have to put work in, and it's daily work to make everything happen, but it's not me scratching my brain as to what am I going to do with my life. It's like I do with my life what I'd always planned to do, is to create myself, to create and follow the dreams and the visions that I've been shown to do, and the whispers, and just go through them. And it makes perfect sense for me
It
to
does, absolutely. And I love that you said it's always been to create my life. And I love
Mhm.
that because we don't think we create our lives, but we do. And
Yeah.
you confirm what I can constantly say all the times. Like our life is we just have to put all of the things together because we already are what we are when we are 20 and when we're
Mm.
30 and when we're 40. It's just that we think we need to be this kind of big thing, and in the reality is we always come together to what we already were before. It just that obviously we didn't have the wisdom and all of that and the experience and that. And I love that. And I'd love to talk a little bit about age situation,
Mm.
because everything for you started to, like, you started to kind of find yourself in your 40s. And you mentioned a little bit earlier your family, you're 40, what are you going to do, and when are you going to get married, when you're going to have kids, la 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 la. And I resonate with that a lot because I'm 41, and my mom now knows, but the pressure of having to be someone or having to do things because that's what everybody does,
Mm.
and breaking free from that and being like, no, I'm just going to be me, and I'm
Mm.
just going to concentrate on figuring myself out, heal myself,
Mhm.
and help other people and help myself in the meantime.
Yeah.
So is that what brought you to want to work with women 40 and over, or is it just because now you're a certain age so you feel like it's just more, it's easier to work with that?
I just think, I mean, if anyone comes to me who's younger who really wants to work with me, I'm not going to turn you away. Um, if we're aligned, not to say wrap you in and come and work with me, but the reason that I'm kind of really specific about 40 and over is because
Mhm.
something happens to you that um is because you're having a realization, because like the societal ideal is of like, oh, you're 40 and you're supposed to, these things are supposed to be
Mm-mm-mm.
happening. And to be honest, if I look at my 40s, that decade was me doing not very much of being really me. Like the creativity was going in different directions, to the second half of it was the podcast, and the music I'd stopped, and I was doing more other things. So, and what I realized as well, I was speaking to some people that I knew, that they didn't even realize I did music, and I was playing them one of
Mm.
my videos. They're like, you do music? I'm like, you've known me for 5 years and you don't know. And I realized I just didn't speak about it because it was so much not what I was doing at the time. But anyone who's known me long enough knows that, that's kind of Carol, but I realized that for many people it's a complete revelation. Um, but that period of time, like, so when I went into my 40s, it was like going into that was an interesting decade. It was a decade that also, because I had like a couple of situationships, with
Mm.
guys that just hadn't worked out, that I was like, I need to step back from that because I need to work out what I'm bringing, that's bringing these like emotionally
Mm-mm.
unavailable boy men around me, and this is not what I want. So I stepped back from that, not realizing it would be so long.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd just be a couple of years, but it turned out to be pretty much all of my 40s being single. Um, and but then it was a time to really cleanse and clean and really get
Mm-mm-mm.
clear on who I was, and what I'm about and what I want now. Um, so yeah, there was the pressure, and there, especially when people are trying to put, like, you're not getting any younger, or like, what's going to happen
Mm-mm.
now, and like, do you think you're still going to be able to have a family, and all, trying to guilt me into it, because it's
Yeah.
so easy for women who maybe are not necessarily doing the work, or not necessarily have a full
Mm.
sense of who they are, to
Yeah.
then be measuring their life by the clock that society is playing for you. So
Yeah.
that if you haven't done this by then, or that by then, and that by then, and then suddenly your menopause kicks in, you feel like a complete failure. And then
Mm-mm.
you go into this deep depression and all of these kind of things.
Yeah.
Um, so I see, and I just bucked against it, because I'm just like, well, that's not me. I no, I've always been that, when people are saying things and I'm just like, but that doesn't make any sense. Especially as, when I woke up on my 50th birthday and went, I'm 50. When I used to speak about 50 when I was 20 and be like, oh my
Oh
God,
my God,
like,
yeah.
when I'm 50, I'm just gonna be some wizened old, like, nothing could be further from the truth. I've got like grey
Right,
hairs and stuff like that, but but I'm by no means what I thought 50 would be.
right,
But
yeah.
I always knew that I wouldn't be that because like, it was always kind of put on my head, like you'll see, Carol, when you get to
Mm-mm,
my age, you'll know what it's like. It's going to be like that. And I was like, well, you know what? I don't know how, but it isn't going to be like that. And you're probably not going to be alive around to see that it's not going to be
mm-mm,
like that. Like had this, the cheek
yeah.
of a young girl, right? Um, but I just recognize now that some of the reasons, and especially when like younger women will come to me going, oh my god, you look like you're 20 or 5. I'm like, I don't want to be 25 again. Trust me, I don't need to go through that
Same.
25 years again. I don't need those lessons again. Thank you very much. I'm grateful for them, but I don't need a replay. I don't want
Mm-mm,
to try. I'm not trying to play a young girl. I'm not. It's not a problem to me that I'm not that age anymore. I'm not embarrassed to say my age as well. There's so much about, oh, are you sure
right.
I'm 50? I'm not in, but I've lived this long, like because over the years, in my tens, in my teens, 20s, 30s, and 40s, I went to funerals of friends of mine who were those ages,
Mm,
who are not
mm-mm,
here now, and I am. And for people who are going, oh, I'm getting old, I'm like, it grinds my teeth. I'm like, you're alive.
mm-mm,
And if you're moaning about the fact that you've got breath in your body and you've got a chance of doing something in your life, there are good friends of mine that are no longer here that,
mm,
I'd give anything to sit down and just like have a whale of a time with them. And you're complaining about the opportunity that you have to be alive and do something in your
right.
life instead of just moaning about it because you're comparing yourself to whoever and
Yeah,
whatever. So the reason why I'm keen to work with women of that age is I see how precarious that moment is, and
mm-hmm,
how to find a way of really celebrating and deciding what kind of woman you really want to be. Because even now I'm like, man, when I was 40, I was just like a child, like for
mm,
that 10 years that I've got, I'm like mentally I wasn't really there yet. And 30, I wasn't really there, and when I start thinking about 30-year-olds and thinking that they're young, I know that like, that's crazy. But then also I make sure as well that if I'm following people on social media, I'm following women in their 60s and 70s and
mm,
80s that can talk about the wisdom of the life that they've lived and talk about it in a positive way,
yeah,
or around me that are doing something useful with their life and embracing their life, so I can learn about how do you make that transition, because we don't really celebrate it in
it's
this
true.
society. Whereas when you're going through puberty, it's like, oh, you're getting your first bra and you're going to have your
Yeah,
first kid,
congratulations. Yeah,
yeah. And then when you kind of come out the other side and you're going through menopause, it's like, oh, take these pills and just lie down.
yeah, your dad.
So,
Yeah, no, it's true. And I love that you're doing this because it's true. Like, it's such a transitional moment of our lives from 40 onwards because so
mm,
much changes within us as especially if you're doing inner work and you're trying to heal and figure out who you want to be next, but
mm,
also we're going through so many biological changes and it can be debilitating. But you're right, they tell us, oh, just take this pill, stop doing this, do that, and it feels like we need to stop being women because we our bodies simply changing. But the truth is that we can do a lot of things. We have way more wisdom, we have way more experience, and we can be more useful for other people than people think that we've been told,
yeah.
because the woman is not here just to have babies and have a family. There are so many different things that we can do, and it's just about getting to know ourselves deeply, physically, mentally, emotionally, and all of that, and really use everything that we are and we have learned in a way that is conducive to our happiness and other people's happiness.
And I'd say as well, one of the things that you can't mess about with as you transition into this period of your life is self-care is paramount, like
Mm-hmm.
100%. You can't cut corners anymore. Like when
Yeah.
you're younger, yeah, you can eat all the things and do all the stuff. It's like your body's not playing that game anymore. Your hormones
Mhm.
are directing what you really need to feed yourself on all levels, on emotion, on spirit, and physically. Make sure that your body's getting the things that it needs to support you, because it's so easy to fall into ill health. And if
Yeah.
your health goes, then like the fabric and the quality of your life will dissipate soon afterwards. So it's like self-care is like first and foremost on every level, making sure you're eating the best things, making sure that you're moving your body in a way that
Mm.
is good for you, not beating yourself up, and if
Yeah.
anything, like cardio is goes against what a woman's body needs when you get to this age anyway. It's just about finding strength in your body, moving yourself in a way, and feeding yourself spiritually, and opening yourself up, and then your life becomes richer. And then you're like, okay, what am I ready to bring in terms
Mm.
of work, in terms of abundance, in terms of relationships and friendships, and you choose. And it just kind of makes sense as well. I saw like the basic breakdown of my own human design, that like things would really just start from 50 onwards to make
Mm.
sense. And I'm
Mm.
like, actually it does, more than ever. And I can see how the different stages of my life were exactly what they were written to be,
Mm.
but I
Is
yeah,
it because you're a
it
six
makes sense.
profile?
Yeah, because I'm trying to remember it now as well, because I remember
Yeah, I'm thinking. No,
I'm
I'm thinking you're
blind
probably a
person.
six profile.
Six, it
If
was like
that's what
6'2",
part.
yeah.
Yeah, 6'2". Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there was like the period of time between 30 and 50 was I was on the roof.
Mm-mm.
There was an on the roof period. And then from 50 onwards was when then I just came down off the roof
Yeah.
and then
And you
went
start to
into,
settle in. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of
Makes sense.
how it's going. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. And I think is also, not having this urgency or fear that we're losing something
Mm,
because we haven't achieved something or we haven't got to that, even if it's just our dreams and our goals. But is that part of, okay, so I have this dream, I have this goal, which in my head I'm gonna make it happen by this time, which is fine, and it's helpful to have some sort of a timing. But at the same time is also letting go of when that's gonna happen. And as long as you continue to do work on yourself and to continue to work towards what the things that make you happy and make you feel good, and then eventually things will come to you, and maybe a little bit later than you thought about. But it really is about being in alignment to happiness and feeling good, and not really thinking about what other people are saying, and what
mm,
you think, what people are saying you should be if you're 40 or 50 or whatever. And just live your best life, which it's not about money or anything, but really is about feeling fulfilled and good within yourself with whatever you have or whatever you're creating.
yeah.
And taking care, like you said, about yourself in every area of your life.
Yeah, and I heard, this isn't my saying, it was a speaker that I was listening to that was talking about work. When you're doing the work and you're working on something and you're wondering when your breakthrough is going to happen. And is what he was saying, he said it's never not working. It's never not
Mm.
working out. It's like for the time that you're doing the work, it's actually working on you. And
Mm-mm.
like, as long as you keep going, and there's no failure unless you just throw in the towel and walk away from it. But as long as you keep doing the work, something is changing.
Yep.
Because even in those moments, and I've had them so over the years, so many times, I'm going like, why am I still doing this? Why am I still putting things, But then a year later, I'm glad, because I've created something, or I've got a better amount of awareness about something. Even when I took like a left turn and started doing graphics and websites and email marketing, I'm like, why am I doing this? But it was something that I could do, that
Mm.
then turned into an income stream for me as well,
Right.
because then other people came to me and went, oh, you did that yourself, can you do that for me? That inadvertently then turned into something else that then I can use again to create for myself and understand how it is. So sometimes it feels like you're being kind of pushed off your path, but it's like maybe you need to go off and learn some skills,
Yeah.
And then, then when you come back to all the things that you need to do, then you're coming back with extra fire and extra skills that can't be taken away from you. Like all the stuff
Yeah.
that I've learned is slowly me just sitting in front of like the laptop trying to figure it out, and then getting it together, and then suddenly realizing like this is the time. This is
Mm-mm.
the time that I was supposed to do all of those things. This is the time that when I'm speaking, this is the time when I'm singing, it's going to come from a place of me being sure of myself. Because even in those
Mm.
younger days, when I wanted it so much, it was still dependent on, will they like me? Will they sign me?
Yeah.
Will they give me permission to be who I want to be? And it's like, no, I never stopped it.
Mm-mm.
And I know what it's like to create an own project. I know what it's like to put together shoots and bring together people and write. So I know all these skills again. So now when I do it this time around, it's all on my terms. Instead of asking
Right.
for anyone's permission, I'm just doing it and bringing in the people that are aligned with it. And it's just going to be so much richer as well, because the message that I'm going to be bringing is a message of my own evolution, of my own survival, and as well as performing out in whatever field I'm doing as well, I'll be speaking to myself, to that
Yeah.
girl who was sitting in the bedroom in Wolverhampton writing songs and just going like, we did it. It just took 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter. But like now,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
you said, you're doing it from a place of deep love and
yeah,
no expectations.
exactly. Yeah.
And when we start, it's all about we want to be accepted and we want to be validated. And then as you
Mm.
move through life, you start to be like, you know what? I'm gonna validate
Validate
myself.
yourself. Exactly.
And
Yeah, yeah.
you can decide to like me or not. It's your
Mhm.
problem, or that's it. And that changes everything. That different perspective of being like, I'm gonna do it for me, and
Mm.
because it makes me happy, and because it gives me joy.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like you talked about creativity, while at the beginning you were doing it as an escape because that was a place where you felt safe and you
Mm.
felt you connected. Now it's a whole thing. It's the whole of your life that feels
Mm.
like that, and no longer. And I feel also that when we get into that space, then the right people come to us, the right collaboration, the right situations, and everything flows differently
Mm.
because we're not forcing it. We're
Mm.
just into it,
Yeah.
and things just change.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just more fun now than
Mm.
that waking up like, is today going to be the day? It's like, no, like like there was always so much angst and so much worry about the things that I was doing, whereas now I see how the what comes out the other side is just dependent on how much I do at any one moment. It's not really to do with anyone external, and like I said, always like reminding myself of how far I've come and where I've come from and what I've been through to get here as well, instead of before it was always, I'm not there yet, I'm not there
Yeah,
yet. It's
yeah.
like, no, I've come so far, and I've still got most of the books that I used to write in as a child, and I found one of my old songbooks that I used to write lyrics in from like 1988.
I
Can you
love
believe it?
it. I
So
love it.
there's and I've put some of the song lyrics in the book as well, because them in themselves
Mm-mm.
are a journey of me writing about my life, diarizing my life, that I didn't even realize was happening.
Yeah,
It's just amazing how it just kind of all
full circle.
comes, yeah, completely,
Yeah,
in a really
yeah.
beautiful way.
Okay, May, I will stay and talk to you forever. We'll be talking for. Tell us a little bit more about how you help your clients, and then tell us where we can find you.
Sure. So like you said before, I work with women 50, 40 plus, but I'm open to everyone, but I just kind of, just because of my recent experience, I know especially what the particular challenges are there. And I talk about creativity and most people go, I'm not creative. I'm like, listen,
Mm-mm.
everyone's creative, so let's knock that one to the side as well. And the reason that I invite women to really open up into their creativity is because then you really find your own power. You know, you find your own spiritual connection, because whatever you choose as your outlet, and it doesn't have to be the arts, it can be gardening, it can be anything, it can be business. You know, if you're able to really understand your own creativity in the process of doing your own creativity, whatever that is, then you'll start to hear your own intuition, because you now have got a need for something, you know, like however you want to do that. You might choose to sit in meditation, you might take a shower, you might sit and, you know, go for a walk in the field. Somehow you'll get into a space where you're open to start to hear what your voice sounds like to you, and what your intuition sounds like to you, whether it's audible, whether it's sensory, whether it's a mixture of all. So you know what those pangs feel like to you. And the more that you're able to really trust that and rely on that, and know that that's for you, the more that you become more confident in yourself, because you're, whatever anybody says outside there, you're like, well, yeah, okay, you're getting it from you. And the more that you have that kind of builds on your own confidence, that you create your own spirituality through that, your own spiritual practice, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be a yoga practice or a meditation practice. Your meditation might just be being in your work, being in your space, but knowing that you have that, and then flowing out from there. Once you get into that feeling and flowing out from there, you realize how much power and magic you have at your own fingertips, you know, and then that just expands into whatever it may be. So initially, I'm just kind of reminding you that had your intuition's been tapping you on the shoulder since you were young, you know, and I'll be asking you questions and delving into things that have happened for you where you kind of brushed it off as coincidence or not. So, you know, we don't acknowledge the magic that happens in our life on an everyday basis, which is why I tell my story and tell stories of like magical things that happened to me, that I was like, well, maybe that was that, you know. And but yeah, it starts there, and then depending on where you want to go with what it is, that power that you found, then it's like, just, okay, what do we turn this into? So everyone has a different kind of direction for their creativity, but in the first instance, it's just aligning you with what that feels like for yourself, and then growing it from there. You know, everyone's expression is unique. And to find me is my website, carolmaewhittick.com. So CarolMaewhittick.com, or on Instagram, Casmic, CAZMICK, if you can't remember all of that.
I know everything is going to be in the show notes. So if you missed that, just go check the show notes, and all the links are going to be there, so you can just quickly take it from there.
Yeah. No worries.
Well, Carol, thank you so much. This was so beautiful, and go check her out. And if you have any questions, let us know. You can comment on YouTube, or you can comment on everywhere you are listening to this podcast. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
No worries. Loved it. Thank you.
What an amazing episode, right? I hope you enjoyed the guest that I had today. If you want to connect, just go to the show notes, and you will find all of the links available. If you want to connect with me, you can either visit my website, theintuitionqueen.com. You can find me on Instagram as The Intuition Queen. And I officially invite you to join my Facebook group, which is called Intuitive Queens Network, and you will find amazing people there, and you can connect with me even more. All right. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a review, or send this to someone that you feel might need to hear what we talked about today. All right. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Ciao.